Hi and good morning, PSWs and all our friends out here in Ontario, Canada. My name is Miranda Romanowicz. I'm the CEO of the Ontario PSW Association and the host of PSW Podcast. And as usual, on Friday at 11 a.m., I'm coming to you live. Today, I'm joined by my Chief Operating Officer, Ian DaSilva, who's come to talk about PSWs in the news. Ian, isn't that something we talk about almost on the daily?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. And PSWs in the news is usually negative, and unfortunately, today's episode will not detract from that. Unfortunately, so yeah, we had an issue in Thunder Bay. News came up on this week about a lady who was posing as a personal support worker and actually went into a home and stole basically all sorts of things from the house and was arrested, and as such is now in jail. So it's a real concern, I think, that we've seen a lot of this at OPSWA. Anyone can walk into someone's house, say they're a PSW, and help themselves to anything they want, as long as the person is not able to defend themselves. This is the
Exactly, and
first time
and
we've
that's
seen
and that's I know, and I mean this is why it's so important. As everyone knows, we have our OPSWA badges here that identify you as an OPSWA PSW. It's not a sales pitch; it's just the truth of the matter. Anybody can make up badges. Ours are very specific because you can actually you can't falsify this badge. But the interesting part about that, Ian, is just walking into someone's house, acting as a personal support worker. The really sad part in a lot of our vendor shows that we go to or public events that we attend, and we're talking to the public, and a lot of people, the public seem to think that PSWs are a regulated profession and that we're hardcore regulated, and that people can, that there's absolutely no way that a PSW can be a criminal or that could steal from them or take advantage of them in their vulnerable states. And so, speaking about that Thunder Bay situation, we had this campaign years ago, as you recall, probably called Who's Knocking on Your Front Door? Because you don't know. I mean, and not to freak everybody out that they're suddenly going to be thinking, oh my God, who's coming into my home? But we have safeties in place when people that are coming to look at your furnace, or people are coming to look at your hot water heater or your electrical or anything like that. They always have some form of identification that identifies them as the person, like an official identification that identifies them going into the home. So the question is, why is this not a known and done thing across Ontario for personal support workers?
I don't know. But according to the Thunder Bay Police Services, they're recommending that all senior citizens and anyone who has a vulnerable person in their family, which is basically everybody out there in Ontario right now, you want to be vigilant about making sure you know who is coming into your house. And I think you're right. I think, Miranda, we've been doing this for years, and I think there's that resonation that still is that if this person is in a scrub, this person is a regulated health professional, they're accountable to a code of ethics, they have everything like a nurse or a doctor. It's not true. It's
No,
not true at all.
no,
No.
no. Don't worry, your dog walker is probably regulated.
Any
Definitely your hairdresser, but not your personal support worker. So, and so definitely an interesting conversation to be had.
and interesting considering, I mean, if you think about it, you don't want someone to take a risk with your hair, but we have people that will allow a fake PSW, not a member of our association, to come into their house, um, develop a rapport with the individual they're caring for to the point where they're able to convince that person they're members of the family and steal the value of that person's estate while that person is still alive. We've seen it at OPSWA a lot where people are asking, I've lost my home, my PSW, who's not ours, took my family home. What do I do? Our result is you need to ask them to give it back to you. That is it. So,
And then you have, because many times too, depending upon what region you live in Ontario, the police either deem it a civil or a criminal matter. Now, you're very fortunate if they deem it a criminal matter, because then that goes obviously in the way of the victim. But if it's a civil matter, more times than not, it doesn't get resolved in any capacity. No
no,
capacity at
no,
all.
it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
It ends up basically just between two people. And if you can't afford to fight it, then you accept the loss and move on with your life.
Which
But yeah,
is so unfortunate, like we hear stories, like you and I've talked about this, Ian, time and time again, where we hear stories of people that get hired as a personal support worker in someone's home, not members of our association, thank God. And trust me, we run to the database whenever a name comes across something in the news. And they move in with these people, and then they segregate these vulnerable primarily elderly or disabled individuals away from their family. They take over as power of attorney for their finances, their mortgage payments, all that sort of stuff. And then they wind up taking the house or they sell the house right from underneath the vulnerable individuals.
Or they'll forge a document and put a mortgage on the house, cash out the money they get from the mortgage, and they'll leave the country. I can't count. I've had too many of these happen, and the money is simply gone. You have a mortgage. You can file a grievance, I think, with the Title Insurance Board of Ontario to remedy that, but that's a 10-year wait list. So you're
So
really,
what do you do?
what do
So I
you
mean,
do?
people always say like, what do you do? And that's why, just for all of our people watching right now, I mean that's why OPSWA really has taken up the charge in relation to ensuring that PSWs are properly vetted and have yearly criminal record checks done and are accountable to a code of ethics and a code of conduct. Because at the end of the day, you know, as a PSW myself, I'm just going to be honest. When I see this stuff in the news, it infuriates me because I know that, you know, these are only 2% of the PSWs that are actually working in the field. The majority of you guys are fabulous. You do it because you want to do it and you want to make a difference, and you do that every single day. However, there are these individuals that are basically making bank off of our titles. And unfortunately, because of the lack of information out there, or, you know, like I always say, people, the information's out there. So I'm not going to say lack of information. The information is out there. We are out there. You know, we are the ones that, you know, are really taking the charge and saying PSWs need to have yearly criminal record checks. They need to have insurance. They need to be verified as a PSW. This is not against the PSW. This is for the good PSWs so that they have that badge of pride and that badge of honor, you know. But at the same time, the public, no one pays attention to aging until it smacks them in the face.
Yeah, that's
And when it does, then suddenly someone says, you know, Bob's uncle's cousin's fish's babysitter says that this person is a really
yeah.
good person and can go into your home and care for your loved one. And next thing you know, they've taken your house, they've alienated you from your loved one, you know. And I'm not saying this is like a regular circumstance, but it happens more so than people think it would actually happen. And it's a nightmare for the families involved.
And taking into consideration how fast, and we had an issue this in the last 2 weeks, where how fast an individual family can find themselves suddenly in a situation where they absolutely need care. If you have one person who's vulnerable, one person who's perfectly able to provide care, and that person breaks their hand,
Yep.
suddenly that couple is now completely helpless. Essentially, they can't.
Yep.
That person can't do anything. So the vulnerability is incredibly amazing. And you're right, as our society, we don't like to think about aging, we don't like to think about negative things. But then you're confronted with this catastrophe at the end of one person's life, and it's usually at the end of one person's life, and the families are simply left to double their loss. They've lost their family member. Now they've lost, not that you want to compare the two, but they've also lost the whatever financial work that person has built up throughout that life is gone. Um,
On. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just so. I mean, it really is amazing, and it also we want to really enforce that it's not fair to the PSWs that are doing the perfect job and doing things right. Those of us who are members of the association, it's not fair to you that you have other people who walk into home care that was assigned by an agency with maybe no repute whatsoever, and you have to compete with this person for employment in that same sector. That's not right, and it's not safe.
No, it's not safe. And again, it's about protecting your schooling. It's protecting, you know, your want to be a good PSW. You're doing a great job. And then you have these beep holes that are out there basically destroying the name of the PSW. And that's what really angers me because it's not, you know, other than the fact of the obvious where the vulnerable are definitely being taken advantage of. And that's been an ongoing thing for centuries that the vulnerable do get
Oh,
taken advantage of. But I always say, you know, the PSWs, we are the voice of those individuals. Like we are so close with these people that it's our job to be their voice. And when we see these vulnerable individuals get taken advantage of, for me, it breaks my heart because they deserve better. I mean, anyone deserves better. Nobody chooses to be vulnerable. Nobody chooses to break their hand and suddenly they can't help take care of their spouse, or have a heart attack and suddenly you're bedridden. No one chooses that. So why should they have to pay the consequence of bad PSWs going into their homes? And then, of course, we could get into the topic of bad PSWs in long-term care facilities. That's a real thing as well. I remember OPSWA really hit the scene, I would have to say, in 2013 with media, because there was unfortunate a murder and an attempted murder in a long-term care facility in Scarborough. And it was plastered across the news. I was plastered across the news trying to keep the PSW name good. Even though it wasn't a PSW who did the murders, they still wanted to know, well, why wasn't the PSW there to save the individual? And then we can get into the conversations of, ratios in long-term care homes. There are not enough PSWs on the floor. When you're trying to, protect the dignity of an individual, you're not going to have the door wide open while you're performing care on an individual. So you're not going to hear certain things that are happening in the hallways. But like that, to us as an association, really all started in 2013. And then like with my guest spots on CTVW5 and then CBC Marketplace, and constantly talking about the lack of people on the floor in long-term care, number one, but also the lack of safety, and,
Mhm.
and not just for the resident but for the personal support worker. So it's interesting how, when we're talking community care, home care, we're talking long-term care, they're both very similar but very different all in the same.
And then how much retirement home is now becoming more like long-term care at the same
Yeah.
time, which is another element of and the increasing acuity levels, which is completely different now. So the range of population you're dealing with in long-term care is huge. And
Oh,
then
it's massive.
the 4 hours of care, you're creating a perfect storm. And if you have a long-term care that doesn't want to hire the full staff, uh-oh, you're in trouble there. So no,
Yeah, and hats off to the PSWs and the nurses in long-term care homes that still show up for their shifts and really, do their best on the floor of these long-term care facilities, regardless of not having a full staff to help the residents.
exactly right. So I guess the question would be then, if I'm a family member and we get this a lot, how do I determine what should I be asking? Like, I'm going to get home care. What questions do I ask Health Ontario Health? What do you think? How would you advise someone, Miranda, if someone said, I'm going to be getting home care from Ontario Health? What should I do?
Well, as a member of the public, first and foremost, I would always recommend that you ask for an OPSWA PSW. That you ask for somebody who's already been verified and even has CAPOA, let's be honest. So our pseudo regulating body here in Ontario, that they're registered. I would recommend with both bodies. Why do I say that? Because then there's like the triple check of that personal support worker. And there's also that accountability factor, which is another, key point for families. If you have an OPSWA, and I can only speak to OPSWA, but if you have an OPSWA PSW that comes into your home, that person has had their education verified, that they have yearly criminal record checks done on them, and God forbid they do something throughout the year. Yes, the association does receive a ding from Triton that will inform us if they have broken the law. They all have $2 million professional liability insurance. They all primarily carry physical ID badges that can identify them as a PSW. And they also have the recourse and the support of their association. So we always invite families that even if you're receiving a PSW, from Ontario Health, you can ask for Ontario OPSWA PSWs, because then you can guarantee the person coming in the door is what I just said they are. Now, a lot of employers do love OPSWA PSWs because of the fact that everything's already done by the time they come in and do their interview. And so many PSWs in the province are OPSWA members. However, if they are not an OPSWA member, you can ask for them to be an OPSWA member. It doesn't break the bank. It's $19.99 a month.
Exactly. And I think if you're a PSW looking for employment, and if you find employers that are hesitant to even acknowledge the value of of the profession or association or the profession itself, don't work for that person. I can't
No.
stress that enough, because I think one of the issues we're seeing in home care is that inability of third and fourth party agencies to verify that this person is a PSW. So you have people off the streets coming in and working, and even the Ministry of Health has no controls embedded to ensure that doesn't happen across Ontario. There's a question that came in that says, "Who investigates issues and abuse allegations?" Great question. It's depending on where it occurs. Do you want to start? I can start if you like. Okay, so abuse allegations at long-term care level are generally handled through the Ministry of Long-Term Care. You need to connect with the ministry. It ties into the patient's bill of rights. So there's a lot of different avenues you need to go, require an inspection and investigation and all that. So that's handled through the Ministry of Long-Term Care. If you're doing a retirement home and there's an abuse allegation, it's generally best advised to help to refer the matter to the Retirement Home Regulatory Authority, who oversees the retirement homes. Another thing you want to ensure is that if you are going into a private care retirement home, that that retirement home is part of our friends at the Retirement Home Regulatory Authority. And home care, Miranda?
Oh, geez. Wild, Wild West, Ian, Wild, Wild West.
I love
It's typically up to the employer, up to the company that they work for. And sometimes it goes past them to Ontario Health or the Ministry of Health, but most times it just stays with the employer. And I hate to say it, but not a lot gets done. So that's the unfortunate part about when I say, Wild, Wild West, I'm not kidding. It's
no,
not just a catchphrase. Home care in Ontario, home care across Canada, let's be honest, is the wild, wild west because you have the public sector and then you have the private sector and then you have the private sector. So you have the public sector, which are big companies that receive kind of the contracts from Ontario Health to provide the free care for Ontarians if you qualify. If you qualify, then you have the private companies, which are primarily, franchises. A lot of times they're franchises, like Comfort Keepers, Right at Home Canada, Home Instead, those individuals as well. And then you get into private care. And private care is entrepreneurial PSW. So these are individual PSWs. Many of them are members of our association who hold the appropriate amount of insurance, the support of the association, but they go out and they work directly with families. And what I'm finding, Ian, from in conversations with the public, this is becoming an increasingly popular place for families or individuals looking for care. They're looking for private working
right,
PSWs
right.
because of continuity of care. They want the continuity of care. They want to take out the middle person so they're not dealing with an agency and they're not paying agency fees.
Well, exactly right. And you have some, I mean, one of the elements of working as a self-employed PSW, this ties a little bit off from our abuse question, but you are protected as a self-employed individual from certain things like inflation, gas prices. You can deduct these and you can absorb those expenses easier than being a full-time T4 employee. That's absolutely. But going back to the abuse allegations, just and something that you said earlier, Miranda, was if you have an abuse allegation in home care, community care, like we said earlier, Miranda, it depends on where in Ontario that occurs. Sometimes an abuse allegation can be interpreted as a civil act,
Mhm.
or it can be interpreted as a criminal act, and it can be dependent on what street you live on. Literally.
So absolutely frustrating. I mean, I remember helping a family out in Hamilton a few years ago where it was an elderly gentleman and his disabled son were living together, and his other son and wife were the ones that were trying to help with his care and his finances. And they had a private working PSW go into this home, and this woman ended up becoming power of attorney over their finances and so on and so forth. And they called the police, and the police showed up and said,
Not our
it's a
problem.
civil matter. There's nothing we can do about it. So I don't know what the final outcome of the situation was at the end of the day, because even as an association, there's only so much we can do. This person was not a member of our association, shocker, and basically, could do whatever she wanted to do. And it was unfortunate for the family. It causes a lot of discord. It causes, and they really don't have faith then in the system, which is really sad to see because then they go, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, go to the police. Police say there's nothing they can do. Well, then you don't have any recourse short of, directly suing this individual
And
if you
it's
have the money.
and people go to the police because there is no alternative. I mean, the police are expected to perform a range of social functions within a community, some of which are beyond their power. Like they don't provide personal care to people in communities. Police do not do that. That's not appropriate. But sometimes police are being asked to go in and assist to deal with palliative patients. It's again back to the Wild West. It's the Wild Wild West with the police there and everyone there, but it's a bit chaotic. So, but we're working to get it better. One thing I wanted to and one thing I wanted you mentioned earlier, Miranda, was for those who are looking for private care out of their own pocket and they're in the community or they're hiring from the family managed home care, self-directed care. I don't quote me on this, but our understanding is that a certain online companies where one used to post ads is now charging. If you need to post an ad and you want to access PSW's care, don't pay for it. You can come to OPSWA, we can connect you. So just an FYI as a service, just make sure people are aware of that.
Charging now, unbelievable,
Oh yeah,
unbelievable.
we're not big on individuals in the community requiring needing to pay to advertise for care.
When they have no choice. These are people that require 24/7 support or support with their ADLs, that they're cognitively aware, but they're physically disabled. And I just think that that is so absolutely absurd that you would charge because they only get a certain stipend anyways for this
Very
stuff.
small, it's very limited, and there's very little, and they don't even think they're allowed to spend a certain amount over on advertising for it. So again, if those who are, if anyone listens or hears this from our first, please let people know this is a service that you just need to connect with us. No problem.
Carly's actually our marketing director is going to be doing an advertisement about that too in the coming week. We do already have a lot of individuals that come directly to OPSWA looking for PSWs that are covered under the family managed home care insurance, which every single member of OPSWA is. So free for all where that's concerned for pick and choose. But no, thanks for bringing that up, Ian, because that really truthfully is. Oh gosh.
Very,
There's a lot of change needs to happen, and there's been a lot of positive things that have occurred
oh yes,
over the
yes.
past, we're turning 15 years old this month, well in June. And a lot of positive things have happened. I mean, PSWs are, we're on the map now. People know we exist. We do have a lot more rights. We're making a lot more money than we've ever made as PSWs as well. But change still needs to happen. I could talk about ratios in long-term care. I could talk about more regulations in home care. It's interesting to go back. Like Ian and I were talking before this podcast and talking about going back and looking at articles back in the day that we were a part of and talking about the rights of PSWs or just about abuse in the workplace on PSWs, on residents, on clients. And it was a really interesting thought that went through my head was nothing, things have changed, but then again, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like things have changed, but nothing has changed. And it's a frustration for the association because we see you, we hear you, we know what needs to happen. And trust me when I say we do say it all the time to government on what needs to change. But it's like, and also, how do you pick just one? How do you pick just one, or how do you pick just a few?
Exactly.
We have that issue.
Well, and I think although I think the real thing is that the profession is being taken more seriously now. I think that's a huge plus. And we're seeing more people enter the field. So it's not a there are good things happening as well. So there is more support coming. And again, we just encourage people to, for those who are looking for care in the community, look to our webpage, contact us, and we'll absolutely help you out and make sure you have the act. Oh, I think we have a question coming in. Question is, who regulates how much franchisee companies charge for PSWs? As I mentioned, my client, I love blah 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 services. Who regulates how much franchise? Okay, that's a good question. In some cases, nobody. So if you're a franchisee and you're offering private care, you can charge whatever that person is willing to pay, and so far as that person is willing to pay it. So if I was super rich and I wanted to pay $200 an hour for a PSW, I could charge that to a company and they would accept that money. There's no rules. Government, there's more restrictions on it. It's better controlled through different contracts and different pre-qualified arrangements. So there's greater controls on that. I think that was the first part. Sorry, what did I miss here?
There's just a whole lot of questions coming through. This person lives in Peel region, not much home care, only looking after individuals leaving hospital care. I thought we were in high demand, or was that only during COVID? No, PSWs are still in high demand. Absolutely. And I'm going to say this, Ian might cringe, but the real problem here is the employers.
It is.
The real problem here is the employers. We work with some fantastic employers, and I'm not talking about all employers. I'm just talking about certain employers don't want to hire above their quota because they like to work in a deficit because then they can ask for more money, they can demand more funding because they're in a deficit. It's not just through COVID that PSWs were in high demand. We've been in high demand since we were created in 1998. So that's never going to change. The next question about what about retirement homes? We have more long-term care people in retirement homes. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes, you
Yes,
do.
we do.
So that's the increase in acuity of care. So you have more people in long-term care homes. Retirement homes and long-term care homes are becoming very similar. totally separate institutions, totally separate rules that run them. Retirement homes are not government necessarily.
And you know what they're asking is saying, like, I'm dealing with long-term care residents. I'm dealing with that acuity, the level of residents, but I'm not getting the pay that I would in a long-term care facility. And the truth of the matter is, yeah, you were not going to. Retirement homes are private entities, private.
Well, they are. And we have to remember what ops was actually our mandate, just to simplify down what we're trying to do. All PSWs want to make more money so they can make a living wage. Our goal is for PSWs to have a living wage. The current goal of every employer that has ever existed on human in society has been to pay as little as possible and to have access to a huge pool of cheap labor. Our biggest battle is trying to convince the government, the Ministry of Health, to implement some minimum standards across these sectors. But the answer is always no. We don't want to do that because they're worried that it will drive out investments. So, and it'll
I'll drive a wedge in PS. They're always worried about.
sorry, you drive a wet, yeah, just
Yeah, like
it's a
they're
drive
always
kiss of
worried about
so,
freaking out the PSWs, and you guys are all going to leave the field, and yet they're not willing. I'm not going to say not willing, because we have some great relationships
oh
with the
yes.
Ontario government. I mean, fabulous people who truly do give a crap. But but it's when you ask for those things that they go, ah.
You go, no, because they
And
and
especially when it's a private, when it's the retirement homes are the private area, and that area the government truly can't really impede.
it would be like if I decided to go to a retirement home and I'm paying out of pocket and my relationship is with the RHRA, not with the government, it's with that home. Because it's
Yeah.
out of my own pocket. If I'm in long-term care, that's a government facility, there's government workers. I'm it's a very different situation. Complaints there.
Very different. Yeah, absolutely. There's another question here. It says, can a live-in caregiver who is on closed work permit join this group?
Good question. It would depend on what those restrictions on the closed work permit would be. If a work permit is specifically restricting you to one employer, you absolutely can join, and we would encourage anyone providing care to join the association to secure your insurance. And just I'm not guaranteed that whether or not your work permit will permit you to leave that employer and go elsewhere, which it probably will not under the current arrangement. Your employer would have arranged to have that work permit through the government and paid resources to make sure that was secured. So
Also, too, if they have training as an international healthcare worker.
yes, if you have international training as a healthcare worker, you can join as an international PSW. So they have equal training for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. A lot of really great questions. A lot of really great conversation.
It's an important conversation, and we're not. This is not the end of the conversation because this is going to tie into some of the other issues that we're dealing with, where we still have a systemic shortage of PSWs across Ontario. Yet there's an intent to drive away about 45,000 across Ontario are going to be out of employment, are no longer eligible to work in about a year. So that'll be interesting how we navigate the waters that we're going to lose all these PSWs, but we'll have to defer that matter to the ministry.
And once we meet with the ministry, then we're going to bring it back to you, PSW. So stay
Absolutely.
tuned for that. That's going to be incoming over the next month. Our advocacy efforts are going to be ramping up on certain things. So stay tuned for that as well. OPSWA is not going to take a lot of this sitting down. And we're going to be getting even louder as the months progress. So make sure to stay tuned into what's going on with OPSWA. If you are not an OPSWA member, make sure to check us out, www.opswa.ca. We are your only professional association in Ontario. We are a chapter of the Canadian Support Workers Association, so we're a proud member of that association as well. So make sure, again, check us out. We got great things. We got some great merch that's incoming on our website over the coming days. We got great opportunities, great education, so make sure to stay tuned. And yeah, I guess we're just going to say thanks for watching, everyone. Ian?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have questions coming in. We will get to these answers. Sorry, I got distracted. Great seeing everyone, and we'll be in. Miranda will be back next week for sure.
We'll be back next week. So everyone take care. And with that, we're going to say OPSWA out.
Absolutely.